Welcome to Zimmerman Podcast, episode 123. Today is week 11 in our new series, The Path Back to You. If you're new to this series, we are taking 1 year to discover how to become who we are meant to be. Each month, we dive into a new topic, and this month, it is all about exchanging ego for soul. Today, we're talking about soul messages from the spiritual world. So let's get started and take this next step on the path back to you. All right, you ready? Let's do it. I'm Jessica Zimmerman, and this is Zimmerman Podcast. I'm a serial entrepreneur, mom to 3, and professional oversharer who has spent a decade building my business and helping others do the same. From wedding floral design to business education, features in Martha Stewart Weddings and Forbes magazine, and even writing and publishing my best-selling memoir, Sleeping with a Stranger, my business has kept growing, evolving, and changing year after year, just like me. Because the best thing about building a strong business is the freedom it gives me to live a full life. And that's what Zimmerman Podcast is all about, sharing real, transparent, in-the-moment reflections about how to live a life, build a business, and lead a family through the good, the hard, and the messy. That's what we're doing each week, right here on Zimmerman Podcast. Welcome to the show. Have you ever been going about your day, doing something totally normal, like getting groceries, logging into your email, picking up your kids from school, or going on a hike, and something happens that stops you in your tracks? Some little coincidence, or a moment of deja vu, or a text from a long-lost friend you just had a dream about the night before. I think most of us have. One of the most beautiful things about believing that there is a bigger purpose for your life, a divine destiny for your soul that the whole universe is conspiring to unleash, is that you get to go through life expecting to be amazed by these little moments where the spiritual world and the physical world intersect. It's amazing how the further I've gotten from the rigid and sometimes dry faith of my childhood, the more I see God at work in the world around me. God got real and fun and real fun for me when I truly began to experience God outside of the teeny tiny box God was put in for me growing up in the American South's Bible Belt. God was church 3 times a week. God was Bible study. God was in a building. I couldn't imagine then how much more God could be. That God could be playful, fun, and near. Here's how. When I lived in an Airstream and hiked in creation most days, when I moved to Nashville and began working with a spiritual advisor, when I became willing to see how God moved in aspects of my life that the Baptist culture I grew up in would demonize or laugh at, that's when I felt most loved, most known, and most cared for in beautiful and specific ways. When I learned to see the spiritual world around me, I got to know God in a truer way. Like I've shared before, my spiritual advisor first shared with me about how God used astrology as a map to connect the physical world, where and when we were born, to the spiritual world, who we are and why we behave the way we do. Hearing that theoretically was one thing, but seeing how precisely my own South Node and North Node were, it gave me true and helpful insights into myself. I was absolutely blown away. It was so spot on. It felt like a secret wisdom that had been withheld from me my whole life. But at the same time, it felt familiar. I mean, who else was taught that the 3 wise men found baby Jesus by following a star? Why were they looking for a star? Because they were astrologers who spent their careers watching the stars, seeking wisdom, and blending the metaphysical prophecy with the physical heavens. So why should it be so strange that we each have our own unique personalized map, a tool, a guide, a personal stamp the moment that we were born. This map, created and given to us by God, the ultimate creator, I couldn't understand how that was left out of my faith culture growing up. And then my spiritual advisor started to share with me about energy and about how it is so obvious that the moon affects the tides of the ocean. That's just science. And that physical reality impacts other areas of our physical world. Just ask nurses and teachers who deliver more babies and have rowdier kids around the full moon. And those who have my similar faith background all believe that God created the moon. And we all believe that God created the water and the seas and the land and the animals. And if the moon can control the enormous ocean's tide, then why are we so unwilling to consider that it might influence us and how we move about the world each month? Initially, I felt the way you might be feeling right now. This is just a little too much for me. I don't know if I'm comfortable with this. This all feels a little out there, a little too woo for me. And then I asked myself, if I'd been taught about the new and full moon, if I'd been taught about birth charts and astrology, if I'd been taught about energy and signs from the beginning, right along other seasonal rituals and patterns like Lent and Advent, would it feel so strange? I realized that if that had been introduced to me with all these other preconceptions I had, I wouldn't even think twice. If it was wisdom I'd grown up with and I'd seen it confirmed in my actual life, I would trust that wisdom and I would lean into it. And that's the story of limiting beliefs, right? If you have a belief that you only hold because you were raised a certain way, or something you've experienced to be true but don't believe because you were raised a certain way, it's time to examine those limiting beliefs. Ask yourself, what rings true? Be willing to see truth in unexpected places. Make God bigger than the tiny God box you've been given. God isn't just in this book that you take with you to church. God isn't just in this book that you read for 10 minutes every morning before you go about your day. God is everywhere. Once you believe that and know that to be true, you can start seeing the ways God's looking to show love to you through signs, synchronicities, and creation. One of the things that my spiritual advisor encouraged me to do early on in this journey was just to be outside in nature as much as possible. And as much as I love a city, as much as I love being a homebody and sitting at home, being all cozied up in my bed with my pajamas on, the best places to experience God, to hear God, to see God, is to be out in God's creations. And one of the best ways to do that is to go on a hike, to not just get out in nature, but be in vast nature. I will never forget. It was March 2022, and I decided to go on a hike by myself. And there was this incredible reserve smack dab in the middle of Nashville. I parked my car, and I began hiking around 11 a.m. I had not been hiking for more than 15 minutes, and I look up, and just a few feet in front of me, in a tree, is what looks like the back of an owl. I whispered under my breath, "Is that an owl?" And it turns its head and looks right at me. I was in complete awe. This nocturnal creature is out at 11 a.m., seemingly just waiting to look at me. Two women hiking in front of me hadn't even noticed the owl. A man right behind me just kept walking. He didn't notice the owl. The owl and I were locked in on each other. It felt like we were the only two creatures in the whole world. After several minutes, the owl looked away and I moved on, kept walking, and turned back. The owl was back to watching me. When the owl turned to look at me, I snapped a quick photo of it because I could not wait to share with my spiritual advisor what I had seen. I was still in a phase where I needed proof or felt like I needed the validation of someone believing me. When I look at that photo, even today, it sends chills up and down my body. If you want to see that picture for yourself, go to the blog version of this podcast episode. I will link it for you in the show notes in the description, and check it out because it is worth seeing. I later looked up the symbolism of an owl, and here's what I found. Number 1, change coming your way. A daytime sighting of an owl might signal a transition or change coming your way. Perhaps you're about to turn a significant page in the book of life, or maybe you're headed for a significant crossroads. Just as an owl adjusts its routine from night to day, you might be about to shuffle some aspects of your own life. Number 2, messengers of clarity and enlightenment. If you've been seeking clarity or answers, an owl's presence during the day might be a sign that enlightenment is near. Owls tend to see things others can't, so their daylight presence might symbolize the drapes of confusion and uncertainty are soon to be lifted. That still gives me chills because that's exactly what happened right after that. It's amazing to me. This will never get old to me. Number 3, trust your gut. Symbolizing intuition, an owl's daytime presence might encourage you to place trust in your gut instincts. Are you paying attention to your inner voice, the one that subtly guides you? It might be time to open up to your intuitive strength. Number 4, embrace your solitude. Finally, owls are solitary beings, and seeing them during broad daylight might be a subtle nudge toward finding comfort and solace in solitude. Are you prepared to tune in and connect with your personal universe, to revel in the authenticity of your own company? A few days after the encounter with the owl, I met with my spiritual advisor, and I told her about the hike and seeing the owl. Can you believe I saw an owl? I found an owl in the middle of the day. Here I am squealing with excitement, and with all the calmness one could have, she simply replied, "Oh, honey, that owl found you." She went on, "See, you're beginning to believe God is more than the box God was put in for you. You're beginning to genuinely believe it. So now God is showing you through God's creations that yes, indeed, God is much bigger. God is everywhere. If we ask, God will show us. If we believe, we will receive." I remember thinking, ask and it shall be given. Seek and you shall find. I'd been taught that. And once I believed the things my soul was telling me was truth, rather than blindly following the religious teachings that had been handed down to me, God began to show up for me in the most miraculous, the most beautiful, and the most personal ways. See, each layer of limiting beliefs that you pull back expands into a new opportunity for messages and synchronicities to get through. For me, after I really started connecting with my soul guides, I learned more about another vehicle for receiving messages. I realized that just like Mary received a message from an angel that she would have a son and call him Jesus, prophetic messages didn't end there. And we can receive prophetic messages and divine truth from a variety of sources, all created by God. Sometimes that's from people. Sometimes that's from our own inner knowing. And we need help unlocking that knowing. I go into great detail about how to receive these messages from God in my course, The Path Back to You. And if you want to learn more about that, then you can go to jessicazimmerman.com and you can enroll today. But I do want to share one with you right now. Let's talk about angel numbers. Angel numbers are repeated numbers that grab your attention. Could be on a clock, a license plate, a sign, a receipt. A cashier could tell you that your total is $77.77. One of the most consistent things that started happening to me when I started waking up spiritually is I would see the number 1111. I talk about this in my Uncovering Divine Femininity series when I talk about the artwork I created, but that started happening so often I would always see 11:11 a.m., 11:11 p.m. every single day on the clock. And I would see it on license plates, and I would see it on an ad on the computer. And it just got to be so frequent that I finally Googled it. Why am I seeing 11:11 all the time? This is what I Googled, and this is what I found. What does it mean if you keep seeing 11:11? Whether you keep catching the time at 11:11 or see 11:11 in phone numbers, addresses, license plates, etc., take it as a good sign. If you are seeing the number 11 repeated, you're connecting with your intuition in a new and powerful way. The article went on. From angel numbers to numerology, the interest in 11:11 comes from the belief that the different numbers carry specific energetic vibrations, and further, that you can work with those vibrations. It all makes so much sense to me now. But at the time, I was so fascinated by this because I didn't start seeing 11:11 until I started down the pathway of raising my own vibrations. That's what I was doing during this time. I was learning about energy. I was learning how to connect with my intuition. For maybe the first time, I was learning about angel numbers in a way where I actually paid attention. So then I started researching angel numbers, and I came to learn that once again, they find you. You don't go looking for them, and they often come in repeated patterns. When you feel like you're losing your mind, I'm here to help you restore your soul. A few years ago, I woke up and felt like everything in my life was a lie. I didn't recognize myself or any of the people around me. For the first time in my life, I questioned everything I had ever been taught or told. I didn't know what was true anymore, and I felt like everything I knew was slipping away from me. I went through a complete dark night of the soul until I was forced by something much more powerful than me and my fears to stop running from myself and start facing the truth. That the pain in my life wasn't coming from the world around me, but from the pain inside me. I remember thinking, what if the cause of your pain and the cure for your pain is the same? You. That's what my program, The Path Back to You, is all about. Not starting over, but starting again on a path that will return you to yourself, a path that will heal and refine you, a path that will break you and make you whole. When searching for answers to what felt like an all at once, completely sudden, never ending list of questions with no answers, all I found was the advice just sit with yourself and heal. All the answers are inside of you. And I remember thinking, gee, thanks. That's helpful. I know I need to heal, and I'm willing and ready to do the work to do that, but how? Where do I begin? Well, it took some time, but after years of therapy, researching on my own, trial and error, mess ups and setbacks, I found my way back home, back to myself. In The Path Back to You, I share with you my own personal story of struggle and trauma as a sacred offering. My hope is that through my story, you can better see yourself. I share with you my darkest moments and the steps I took to find my light, the light I had dimmed for most of my life. Throughout all the heartache I've endured, I've finally found peace, and I want to share my roadmap with you. If any of this resonates with you, trust that this episode found you for a reason. Trust the divine intervention. Those brave enough to have embarked on a healing journey know how incredibly lonely and painful it is. I remember feeling completely isolated, like I didn't even belong in this world anymore. It was scary as hell. But I want you to know you are not alone. While I fully believe healing is a solo journey, I think it's totally okay to have a roadmap and a pathfinder who has gone before you to guide you as you return home to you. Join me on the path back to you. Click the link in the show notes or go to jessicazimmerman.com to learn more. And just for you, podcast listeners can get 15% off with code PATH15. That's PATH15. So, just as a feather may find you, or an owl found me, And that was a way of God showing me God is with me. God is so much bigger than the box he was put in for me. This became another way to show me that God is here. God is with me all the time. What was so interesting is that, once again, I would be thinking about something specific. I'm at a stoplight and I'm thinking about a certain situation, and I look up and the license plate in front of me says 555. And so I would research the meaning of 555, and I remember genuinely smiling, laughing, dancing out of joy again. I have been in the deep dark for so long. I'd shed so many tears. I had felt so lonely, and I was just giddy. I was like, are you kidding me? I realized that I hadn't been alone, that God had been trying to communicate with me this whole time, and I just wasn't speaking the same language. I wasn't connected to that vibration of energy, the energy of God, the energy of unconditional love. I realized how fun listening to God could be, that God has a sense of humor, like, this is a good time. And let me just say, if you don't have a lot of high vibrational people around you, or people who have tapped into their spiritual side, or people who have done the deep work to begin listening to their own intuitive voice or start trusting their own soul, this is not information you want to share with them. They will think you are batshit crazy, okay? Not everything is for everybody, and not everything is to be shared with everyone. Some things are just for you, and that's okay. So may I suggest that during this time, you just keep these beautiful interactions between you and God. That's who they're intended for anyway. This is all part of the idea that we are more soul than ego. And when we live into our eternal souls, we can become more aware of those souls that have left the physical realm fully. Listen, I understand if this is a stretch for you, and I understand if it seems like a lot. It can be overwhelming. Know that none of this came to me all at once. If it did, I might have rejected every single bit of it. Everything I just shared came into me in little drips, just a little bit at a time. I wasn't ready for them all at once, but I stuck with one until I was ready for more. And then I had my spiritual advisor guiding me to the next one. Don't rush the process or pressure yourself. Trust and take your time. On the other end of the spectrum, when you first learn about this, some of you might be tempted, like I was, to Google any old thing and keep your eyes out for messages all the time. That's also a trap. Try to stay passive and just observe messages being sent your way. If you have to go look for them, it's probably you reading into things rather than wisdom being shared with you. Regardless of which way you go with this, I hope at the very least that you can hear that God is amazing. God is so creative, and God is so funny. God loves a team, and God is with you always. And all the magic God used to create the earth, God also used to create you, and is still using that magic to speak to you. And just now, as I thought I had finished writing this portion of this series earlier in the day, I tucked my kids into bed. The weather was nice, so I went to sit on my back patio for a few minutes before going to bed myself. It was dark outside. I was sitting on my outdoor sofa when a raccoon walked up to me. I guess it smelled my raspberry lemonade that I was sipping on and was distracted enough that it didn't even see me. But when I saw it that close to me, I startled and it ran away. I immediately grabbed my phone and looked up the spiritual meaning of seeing a raccoon at night. That is not something that happens every day. And remember, I did not go seeking it. The raccoon came up to me. It found me. That is not something that has ever happened to me before. I've never been that close to a raccoon. And at night, I don't know. I'm going to Google that one. I'm going to research that one a little bit. Here's what I found. Encountering a raccoon at night carries profound spiritual significance, representing the end of a cycle, personal growth, and empowerment. The spiritual meaning of seeing a raccoon at night holds a powerful meaning. It can symbolize the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new one. representing growth, transformation, and stepping into one's power. Remember, every encounter with nature is an opportunity for spiritual growth and understanding. Embrace the wisdom being offered to you, that God is trying to communicate with you through beautiful, miraculous, and sometimes hilarious ways. If you want to read about the more soul synchronicities that have found me since I began this journey, I invite you to join my course, The Path Back to You. I explore this topic in more detail and share several other ways I've learned to see the divine purpose in my day-to-day life. Thank you so much for joining me today as we journey together on this path back to you. I hope what you heard resonates with you and you can take it with you into your week. If you're looking for more resources for the journey, go to jessicazimmerman.com. I'll see you right back here next week for our next leg of the journey.